For centuries, First Nations had long inhabited the area around Englishman River, and by the time the first pioneers arrived, the native population had dwindled greatly due to massacres by marauding coastal tribes in the early 1800s. The first white settler to arrive on these shores was John Hurst Sr., who arrived by canoe from Nanaimo in 1870 and preempted land at the mouth of the Englishman River. At the time, only a rough trail had been blazed between Victoria and Comox, and within a few years his young sons Albert and John Hurst Jr. began working the land, and in 1885 John Jr. with his new wife Anne Harris were the first to settle there permanently.
And they had a small hotel and the telegraph office down just before you get to Englishman River.
Hurst brothers, and they had it all fenced one time and a big barn built on it and a house, and they used to run cattle on there.
And then Mr. Parks and his family came in, Theodore Park. He was our first postmaster. And in those days you had to row out with a canoe from here to meet the boat, and they just dropped the mail and whatever provisions was ordered into this canoe and they'd bring it ashore. Well, then the plumbers came, and my grandfather, and the Morrisons at Arrington, and the McMillans. Two Craig brothers and James Lowry, who used to be our local blacksmith, came here at the same time. They were all working on the building of the CPR railway. The old hotel where the Hearsts were, that burnt down, and they built a hotel, the present Rod and Gun Hotel that's in Parksville today.
When he died, his wife carried on. But Anne Hurst was quite a businesswoman.
No doctor here for many years, no dentist. And I used to drive team from Beaver Creek to Cameron Lake, delivering this stuff along the road to the different railway camps when they were either slashing it or grading it. And then in about 1911, the railway came in.
A lot of the people came, they would get off the boat in Nanaimo and come up here by train. That's the way my mother-in-law came. And Ernest met her at the station with his buggy to take her home.
My grandfather, Fred Shelley, had a bakery in Vancouver. He then sold out to his brother and moved to Parksville on the property on Stanford Avenue that my sister and myself live on today. Came here in 1914. My dad was 2 years old at the time.
6 to 7 feet through, and they had to be 15 to 20 feet long, what the horses and oxen could pull on skids. They had a fellow there with a bucket of grease, and they had logs in the ground, and they'd grease the logs. And they'd pull these big logs, and the fellow who used to blow the stumps, they used black powder.
Yeah, they raised strawberries on the farm and chickens. He had a huge, well, it was one of the largest incubators in BC at the time.
It was a hard life, but everybody was happy. If anybody got lost their home by fire or a barn by fire, they were there the next day to rebuild. Everybody helped one another.
It was quite a contingent went from the Parksville-Qualicum area, and they were billeted down in Victoria, and they went overseas as a group from there.
Yeah, I came home with stretcher case to Victoria, and then from there I went up to Qualicum.
So this
convalescent hospital, it was the hotel prior to the war.
In 1915, the Parksville Women's Institute was born out of a desire to help their men overseas.
Farmers' wives that got together and, well, they made socks for the men overseas during the war. They sent parcels. They did everything to make life maybe more comfortable.
They were the ones who put the trees on Memorial Street in as a memorial. They helped new war brides who were out from England, couldn't bake, didn't know a thing about taking care of their babies, etc., etc.
The Island Hall Hotel, opened by two British ladies in 1917, was the first of many tourist facilities.
Island Hall was the icon of Parksville at that time for tourists. It was a beautiful old building at the time. They used to demand quite a bit of tourism out of that facility.
they had a beautiful fireplace, all with stone, and it was really very beautiful. And it was a nice place to have dinner. It was a nice setting altogether.
They had great celebrations at Christmas and New Year's. They were very well known for that.
the Women's Institute that envisioned a waterfront park, and in 1922, residents voted to buy the proposed property, now Parksville Community Park, for a price of $3,000, a bargain even in those days. The first Dominion Day celebrations in 1923 attracted more than 1,000 people.
Granddad was an instigator in the purchasing of the property. It was off of the Hearst family. They had fundraisers and that to try and buy the park. They used to have barn dances.
Yeah, well, the 1st of July was always quite a do down at the flats, as horse racing and what have you. Yeah, it was quite a community affair where not only Parksville, but Coombs, Errington, Hilliers, the whole works.
Our field at Parksville was wide open flats down near the river. They used to have football games.
That ball field has been turned over, lifted up, turned around, I don't know how many times. The Parksville used to have quite a strong senior men's baseball team. It used to be, the baseball was on and people were there. They covered the bank on the side of the hill there and all down around the home plate and that.
The Second World War in Europe and then in the Pacific would have a lasting impact on Parksville and the surrounding communities. In the event of a Japanese invasion, a local group of the Pacific Coast Militia Rangers was formed.
The idea being that the Rangers were pretty well all hunters, and they've hunted all over Vancouver Island. If a landing had been made, then the idea was that these fellows would be able to know where to go and where not to go, and that call on their knowledge of the lay of the land. That never did happen. However, it was prepared and it worked out very good.
I remember when I was a kid, we had these blinds, but the blinds all had to come down at night. So the militia would come by to make sure that you didn't have a crack of light coming up.
We had a lot of English war brides, considered the biggest influx of immigrants of anybody.
When I got to Parksville, I was going to send a cable to my parents so that it arrived safely. Tom wasn't right. It's not a village, it's a hamlet. It was so small. But I like being outside and the outdoors, so I quite liked it here.
There wasn't very much. There were just a few stores at the junction of the Alberni Highway and the Comox Highway.
And when I was first here, Tom and Jack took me to the Rod and Gun for a drink. They went in one door and I was told I had to go in the other door. It was ridiculous.
During the Second World War, 99% of the soldiers, as they went up island, they stopped in at the cafe. Us kids helped Aunt Mary out with their business and served ice cream and stuff like that.
I used to sit outside and sell my little souvenir. And people would stop in their cars. Quite a surprising number of tourists from the States in those days. It was a big trade. People just loved coming up here for the fishing, for the beaches, for the nature.
Well, the community park was an open park. You could camp there anytime you want. When I was growing up, in the summertime when we got out of school, we'd load our trailer up and take our big 3-bedroom tent in there, and we spend 2 months in community park in Parksville. And we spend the whole summer down there.
Quite an active, dramatic community. There was drama, there was quite a bit of music. There was a fair amount going on for a small district.
The old community hall, that used to be a drill hall building in Nanaimo. And they went down with power saws and literally cut it up and put it on logging trucks and hauled it up to Parksville. If you had any event, the biggest event would be at the old community hall. There was no skating rink, there was no swimming pools, everything else. You made your fun. The gang all got together, went down the river, and went swimming all summer long. And the winter time, we used to have the community park on the hill there. We'd toboggan down that. Life was slower and you enjoyed things more, and you had more time to enjoy them. Not that they didn't work hard. They always seemed to make time for the good times. It was a great town to grow up in.
The strength has always been and still is the community spirit. And that when I read the newspapers, that this still comes across. People are involved, people are interested. And I think that's what keeps communities going.